Hello again. Our next speaker. First of all, thank you for being for being active, for being with us, and keep asking questions on Discord and Telegram, etc., etc. Our next speaker uh, is Arman Murzabulatov. Arman has a very long career of software engineering and development, and he will talk to us about building scalable serverless backends for mobile applications, which is a very interesting and very specific topic that I too like to learn more about. So I hope you join me to welcome Arman here, and let's hear his talk.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk on building easy and scalable serverless backend. My name is Arman, and I have an extensive and diverse experience working in software engineering and software development in general. So I have gone through the entire journey from Pascal, C++, Java, and TypeScript with JavaScript. At some point of my life, I was a co-founder and CTO of a software as a service startup company, which was quite successful. And my last 5 years, I'm focused on fintech, building banking applications and banking journeys for well-known banks. And yeah, I was a semifinalist of ACM programming contest when I was a student back in time. And today I'll be sharing my experience and insights on creating serverless backend architecture for various projects. We'll explore key features that are needed for building apps, besides, of course, the app itself. It is the support for authentication, database and data storages, cloud functions, which is basically the APIs and some scripts that are running on the cloud doing something. And lately, machine learning is also a need for modern applications, and many more. Our examples will be focused on Angular-based web app, but the practice can easily be applied to React, to VueJS, or any other modern framework. Let's dive in and learn how we build powerful serverless backend for a project. But before doing so, let's first answer the question, why do we need the serverless backend? And let's start with the challenges that many of us deal with having dedicated backend infrastructure. Basically, scaling and maintaining this type of infrastructure is often time-consuming, resource-intensive, and can occur high cost. So the complexities associated with server management can detract from our primary focus, which is building apps and delivering exceptional user experience. This is where the beauty of serverless backend solutions comes in. So there are enormous advantages of this approach. Is first of all, the main advantage is serverless is cost effective. With serverless, we only pay for what we compute, and we don't pay for the idle server costs. So example, normally if we have like a dedicated server that performs, few operations an hour, and with servers, we pay only for those few operations, but not like for the server running and doing something like entire time. Then it is fast in development. Serverless architecture reduces the responsibilities for developers. So we have freeing up time for focusing on the application logic. Another big advantage is easy scalability. So serverless solutions automatically scale with the demand of the app. So we don't have to provision, manage, and do all this stuff. So basically we can just start the application with 5 users, and then if it gains traction and becomes viral, and we have like from 100 users to 100,000 or 100 million users, it automatically scales. That's like huge advantage. And lastly, low maintenance. So server maintenance tasks such as capacity planning, patching, managing security, vulnerabilities, everything is handled, freeing up a lot of time for developers. And and basically, given all these advantages listed, serverless backend are particularly beneficial for the following. Early stage startups and dynamic products where rapid prototyping and flexibility are the keys. Then the solo developers working on hobby projects. So it allows to focus on the front end and user experience without worrying the server infrastructure. And the mature teams working on proof of concept or MVP. So enabling to rapidly test, validate the idea, and move on. So that's not the only, but in these three groups, it's like the must. But there are also cases when not to use it. For example, a large product with the scale of Netflix, for example, where they use a lot of computation. At this case, for such a large tech companies, it makes financial sense to have the dedicated server infrastructure, to hire people, to basically to build their own server infrastructure and maintaining it. So in that case, it would be cheaper. But if you go with serverless and you build Netflix with the same amount of user and the views, you'll have to pay billions of dollars to the providers. So in short, embracing servers, by using serverless backend, we can avoid many of the pain points associated with traditional management and accelerate the development process and more efficiently allocate our resources, basically focusing on building app. Now let's dive deeper into how we can use these benefits in our projects. And we will utilize the power of Firebase for that. The Firebase is a solution provided by Google, but basically in this talk, I'll cover the Firebase, but it can be used on Amazon server solutions, on Microsoft, Cloudflare, Netlify, Vercel, and many more vendors. So basically there are many vendors, many solutions, and Firebase is only one of those. But in order to go deep and really give an examples, I will use Firebase as our tool, but feel free to use any vendor. So firstly, what exactly is Firebase? Simply put, Firebase is a comprehensive app development platform brought to us by Google. It is designated to provide us with a serverless backend infrastructure, meaning we can focus on building our applications without having to worry about server management or database scaling. And Firebase isn't only about serverless though. It offers a whole suite of tools and services that facilitates various stages of app development. That's in short Firebase. And some of the key features of Firebase include Firebase authentications. This service makes building secure authentication system easier, supporting a variety of sign-in methods. We'll cover that very deep. Then a real-time database, an efficient NoSQL database that lets you store and sync data in real time. Then Firestore, fully functioning, flexible and scalable database for your application. Then the core, the main one, Cloud Functions. This lets us run backend code without managing servers. And Firebase Machine Learning. This feature provides a powerful way to integrate machine learning into our apps. So even without the knowledge of machine learning, we can actually use it. And that's just the core. There are many other features of Firebase to enhance and streamline the development process. So this is basically our short agenda. We will run through this 5, 6 and cover a bit more. So buckle up, let's move on. But before now, why should we consider using Firebase? So here are some key benefits. So simplify backend development. So basically, for example, imagine you're building some app that you want to test, you want to try, then Firebase manage the backend. So we can focus on creating that application. It can be web app, mobile app, and so on. And the majority of backend is handled by backend development. So backend development makes it quite easy and faster development and deploy. So, and of course, easy integration. So Firebase works seamlessly with popular front-end frameworks, as I mentioned before, make it a good option. So yeah, that's like the 3 main reasons why I chose Firebase for a few of my projects and not the other vendors, but you feel free to choose any. And now finally, let's move on and explore the most critical aspect of any application development, which is, I think, user authentication and secure user authentication, because I don't think any app, like majority of the app, need user authentication. And Firebase Authentication is a comprehensive solution that simplifies the complex and crucial process of user authentication. It supports a variety of authentication providers, ranging from traditional email, password sign-in, and third-party like Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and Apple sign-in, and so on. And the main advantage of using Firebase Authentication is that it simplifies user management and security, allowing us to focus more on core functionality of the app. So basically, this provides us with entire user management, user authentication infrastructure from Google. We'll later see how to integrate it, but with minimal effort, we have fully functioning, fully secure user management and user authentication, and then in the console we can see the users and so on. It's brilliant. And now let's see how we can set up user authentication. The process is relatively straightforward. So in the Firebase console, we enable the authentication providers that we want to use. So here is the screen. You can choose one or multiple providers based on your app's requirements. For example, I can have email password, Google, Facebook, and GitHub authentication. And I'll have those buttons like sign in with Google, sign Facebook, and so on. Then our next step is integrate Firebase SDK into our application. This allows apps to interact with Firebase and utilize its features. So basically, this is classic SDK. We install the Firebase package in our application, and then we have these environment variables like API key, and basically credential for using it. This is the screen from actual dashboard. Then you need to implement the sign-in and sign-up flows for your app. That's basically building the sign-in in the application, in the front end. But even for that, Firebase has built-in UI libraries. For example, for providers like login with Facebook, Twitter, and so on, we have already open source UI libraries that we can just use even without building it. Then there is also the more classic email password authentication, and there is also email link authentication with this passwordless. So basically, you only use your email, and every time you sign in, you get email with like some link to authenticate. And for that, there is also building or open source UI, or you can go custom and build the user interfaces for logging in, for signing up yourself. And yeah, and basically, and framework utility libraries like Angular Fire, there are libraries for React and for Vue. Those packages, they're supported by community, and they make it very easy to actually building logging. So the authentication can be set up in like, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. So basically, let's dive deep into the mechanism. What happens when users signs in with our application? So basically, information about the user is returned with a device callback. This allows us to personalize the app for specific user. Then that user information contains unique ID that is guaranteed to be distinct across all authentication methods. And that unique ID is used to identify the user in different parts of backend system. For example, later we'll cover database and cloud function. So basically, that user ID would be used there. And Firebase will also manage the user session so that when the users remain logged in after refreshing browser or up when the application restarts. And yeah, so basically auth allows us to focus on the users and not the infrastructure. I think that's enough about the process. Let's dive into a bit. Let's move on. So now, while Firebase does a lot of heavy lifting for us, for example, it does everything. We just use some UI library and we have the entire flow. It's important to follow some of the best practices for secure authentication. So always use up-to-date authentication libraries. This helps us to protect users' data, obviously, and makes application more secure. Then I would personally advise to, if user data is critical, always tend to use multi-factor authentication where possible. This adds extra layer of security and is especially important for application handling, as I mentioned, sensitive data. And regular monitor review your users' access logs. This work can be done in the console of the Firebase. This can help quickly identify and respond to suspicious activities. And after the authentication is done, what's the next? Now we can dive into the next most important decision that we have to make while using Firebase is the serverless backend, basically choosing the right Firebase database. And in the Firebase world, provide us with two excellent NoSQL cloud-hosted databases, the Firebase Realtime Database and Firestore. Each has its strengths, and the best choice, of course, depends on the situation and the specific needs of the app. And firstly, the Firebase Real-Time Database, it is ideal for apps requiring low latency updates and presence detection, such as real-time collaboration apps, IoT devices, and gaming apps. Its key feature is real-time data synchronization, meaning any change in the database are instantly pushed to all the connected users. And data in this Firebase real-time database is stored in JSON format. On the other hand, Firestore is also NoSQL cloud-hosted database. It offers real-time updates as well, but brings additional features to the table. It supports offline data access, and provides with more advanced querying and indexing capabilities. And Firestore's data model is based on documents and collection, which can be more scalable and easier to manage for large-scale apps, complex data structure, and apps that with multiple sub-collections. And to install Firebase with Angular Fire, we need to add the Angular Fire. For example, this is basically example with Angular. After installing the Angular Fire, we just configure Firebase settings in environment TS, and then we basically import and initialize Firebase in our add module. And then basically we enable desired database. For example, it can be Realtime or Firestore in the console. Then we define the data model in our application to represent data structure, and finally create service to handle database operations to basically perform CRUD operations on the data. And basically, I think the example would speak more, as we mentioned. So to perform data operations for real-time database, it's as easy as we import and inject Angular Fire database in the service, for example, in Angular. Then for reading the data, we just basically assuming that we injected the service and its name DB. So we say DB object value changes. This returns the observable that we can subscribe and read the data in real time. To write data, we use set. For updating, update. For deleting, remove. So basically, this is the CRUD operations for the real-time database. And for Firestore, it's quite similar. So we import and inject Firestore service, assuming we called it AFS, Angular Firestore. For reading data, we set the path to the document, and we say like this AFS doc. Again, value changes. This returns observable that streams the data. And for writing, it's set. For updating, it's update. For deleting, delete. So this is also CRUD operations for Firestore. So imagine you create a database, then you inject it. You set the path for different documents, and that's it. By using this operation, you can already write, read, and update in your database. And you don't even touch the server. You didn't scale this. It just works. So it saves a lot of time. And now we dive into further. So we have our authentication and we have the database, but that's in most of the cases not enough. So we can extend with cloud functions. So what is Firebase Cloud Functions? Those are serverless event-driven functions. They're written in language like Node.js, Python, and Go in case of Firebase, and they automatically scale in as the app's usage grows. Remember, I mentioned like you have 5 users, then you have 5 million, so it automatically scales. And the serverless nature of these functions means that we don't have to worry about managing servers. So we write the function and the Firebase takes care of the rest. So, so technically speaking, we write some Node.js functions that need to be executed when user performs some action, for example. Then basically, when users access it, the instance is created, then this function is executed, and that's it. If there's no usage, the instance dies, and that's it. That's technically it, but and if you have like millions of users, then you have multiple instances running, like starting up, and then they all execute, they execute all 1 million requests, then, for example, the activity drops, then the server scales down. So this is basically cloud functions are like the core or serverless. And like if you access Wikipedia and you say like serverless, it would say like the cloud functions. But for this talk, serverless is more of a complex for, what I meant here is the scope of this talk is broader, not only cloud function, but all the tools that basically all the tools, services that makes backend accessible without being a backender, basically. And these cloud functions have a wide range of benefits and use cases. So they allow us to execute custom server-side logic without need to manage servers. As mentioned earlier, then they can be incredibly beneficial for performing tasks like data validation, transformation, and aggregation. So, for example, building APIs. So in Node.js, for example, we use Cloud Function for that. And furthermore, this function can respond to events from various Firebase services like Firestore, Realtime DB, or Authentication. For example, when a new user signs up, send them welcome email from MailChimp right away. That is Cloud Function. And let's install the Firebase tools with, let's basically set up and deploy Cloud Functions. So it consists of 5 easy steps. First, we install Firebase CLI with yarn on npm. Then we initialize functions. So we run Firebase init functions in our project directory and select the language that we want to use, for example, Node.js, Python, or other, and then it initializes the functions. Basically, it initializes the index.js or index.ts file, and basically the third step is creating a function. So we write our functions in index.js or index.ts file, and in the function directory created by Firebase CLI. Then to deploy the function, we use Firebase deploy only functions command to upload the functions to Firebase, and that's it. After those 4 steps, function is there in Firebase, and when it is accessed by API or when it's triggered by some events, it would be executed. And the last step would be to monitor functions. So we use Firebase console to monitor. We have basically Firebase console is the Firebase dashboard, the one that I showed in the beginning. So there we can monitor the execution times, errors, and so on. And so basically to call these functions from our applications, we import Firebase app and Firebase functions packages for front end. For example, for Angular, it's Angular Fire. Then we initialize with Firebase with project configuration. Then to call the function, we use the script Firebase functions HTTPS callable. Then to create reference and then call to execute the method. And example use case, the code can run in, so basically, the example that I mentioned earlier with the email sending. And basically, while those functions executed, we don't have to worry about scaling, provision, or decommissioning those apps. And this is the example of the function. So basically, this is it. For example, this script is an example of an example of Cloud Function. Of course, it has empty body, but you can do whatever. And then from the front end, for example, from the Angular, we can inject the service from the Angular file, and then using this syntaxes, we can convert it to promise and do something with it, or we can use it as observable. And basically, now I think the latest version is generation 2 Cloud Functions, and it was announced last week at the Google's I/O event. And the second generation features has two main advantages. And basically, one main advantage is now remember when I said like when user accesses the function, it sets up instance and run this function there. So now each instance can run up to 100 requests in parallel. So that's concurrency wasn't possible before. So because of that, it doesn't need to start too many instances when app goes viral, so that it has less cold starts. Cold start is when the instance is started. So for example, when 1 million requests applications go viral and we have 1 million requests, previously it had to run 1 million instances. And now it can just start 10,000 instances, which each of the instances can run 100 requests. And the second update, basically from the event, is Firestore trigger support, which allows to change based on a query. But more on that later. And that's the core. And let's now move on and explore additional Firebase capabilities. So first of all, also Firebase Extensions. This is new relatively. It was also announced during the event last week. And Firebase Extensions are prepackaged serverless solution that let us quickly add the capabilities. And it provides a rich ecosystem of open source extension written by Google or third parties. They can easily build nice features into the API. For example, we can add full text search with Algolia, email marketing with MailChimp, or messaging with Twilio. Extensions are easily configurable once deployed, no maintenance required. When a new improved version of extension is available, we can update it with just one click of a mouse. And these extensions are also built on top of Google's serverless architecture. So just like Cloud Functions, they automatically scale when the load goes up. So in other words, when Cloud Functions appeared, everybody started building, but there are some features that majority or like a lot of developers build. And these basically generic functions are being generalized and put as an extension. For example, you can see from this screen and from the example, like search with Algolia, or send message with MailChimp. Those tasks, I think, before the extensions, they were rewritten hundreds of times. And also one of the latest extension that was released last week during the event is a Chatbot with Palm API. Palm API is basically an analog of ChatGPT from Google. So they have an API like OpenAI API, but here we have an extension that automatically integrates it with Firestore database. And for example, for Firestore, we can have like a prompt and then automatic. Yeah, basically when, for example, someone writes a query or a question to Chatbot from the user interface, then it is written into the Firestore to database. Then once the new once something added to this database, it triggers the cloud function that accesses Palm API, and then the generative AI would generate the answer and update the Firestore. And in real time, we can build the ChatGPT, copy of ChatGPT supported by Google's API seamlessly. I think that's pretty cool, and you should go and try. And yeah, and basically this is a screenshot from that presentation. These are the latest the latest extension that has been added to the collection, to the ecosystem. So yeah, we can see this chatbot with Palm API, summarize text with Palm API, convert text to speech, and so on. And yeah, be aware that anyone can build extensions, and if you have a great idea, you can write a generic cloud function, and then you can deploy it as an extension, and then like thousands of developers can reuse it. And yeah, and one of the last topic is Firebase ML. I will speed up a little bit. So with Firebase ML helps us to leverage the power of Google's machine learning capabilities directly in our app. And it provides easy-to-use SDK to pre-train data models for common machine learning tasks. And it also supports custom model deployment and hosting. And it has pre-built APIs for common machine learning tasks. For example, image labeling, it recognizes entities in an image, text recognition, recognize and extract text from images, object detection tracking, detect and track object in an image, face recognition, barcode scanning, landmark recognition, so it recognizes well-known landmarks in an image. So all these models are pre-trained. They are already, we don't have to be a machine learning expert. We can just, we need text recognition. We use that API, and it has seamless integration with other Firebase services. So also check it out. And also custom models are supported, and the deployment and hosting is the process in general is we train our own custom machine learning model and deploy it to Firebase. Then our app downloads the custom model from Firebase and use it to make predictions. Then Firebase handles hosting, serving, and of our custom models. So I have never done that, but if you are a machine learning expert, or you know how to create and train models, you can also use the machine learning. I personally only use pre-built models. And that's basically the core, the main, but there are other features or functionality of Firebase. I will just list them. So it's storage to store and serve user-generated files. It's analytics to gain insights into user behavior. It's hosting, so every app can be hosted with a global CDN. And Firebase remote config is to customize behavior without redeploying, and many more. And basically, I gave an examples with Angular, but actually, Firebase is a framework agnostic, and Firebase SDK is compatible with many popular front-end frameworks. It can easily be integrated with React, VueJS, and many others. For example, for React, it's React Firebase or React Redux Firebase packages. For VueJS, VueFire, VueXFire, and so on. Yeah, and there are many general resources. For example, Firebase documentation or community examples or tutorials. You can find integration with mostly all the frameworks, even Svelte. And oh, sorry. Oops, sorry. So basically, yeah. So the benefits of it, I think I don't need to explain the advantage of having a cross-platform. And all right, we reached the end of the journey with Firebase and the potential of the serverless backend. And let's quickly revisit some of the key points that we have discussed today. So Firebase significantly simplifies server backend development, freeing up time for the development. It provides a suite of tools, services such as authentication, real-time database, Firestore, cloud function, machine learning, extensions, and so on. And importantly, Firebase is compatible with popular framework with Angular, React, VueJS, furthermore increasing the possibilities. And what next? As a developer, I urge you all to leverage the Firebase to build scalable, cost-effective backend solution for your apps. Don't be afraid. Experiment with different features to find the perfect combination for your project. And yeah, for further, I mean, basically, basically all the theory, most of the theory that you need are in these slides. Now you can jump in, start building. As you build, you learn more. The tools that we covered covers 80-90% of the needed tools. Maybe you need some extra tools, but you can read. For that, I recommend the Firebase official documentation. Obviously, their YouTube channel is quite nice with lots of practical examples. And remember, Firebase is not just a tool. It's basically I think the way of thinking where you can just delegate a lot of things to the infrastructure, and you just utilize the infrastructure of Google a lot. And with that, I conclude my talk. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope you found it informative. Again, thank you very much for your attention. And now I'm open to answer your questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Arman. That was great talk. I did use Firebase many years ago, so for me it was really nice seeing the evolution of the platform, how it changed since I don't remember. Was it 2015, 2016? I don't remember when was the last time I was trying it. So I have a question about this new announcement about the parallelism. All right, you talked about like the single instance can now run up to 100 functions in parallel. Doesn't mean it's like the same function, or it's like different functions from your application can be run in parallel. What does it entail exactly?
Well, basically, I think that's more of a. I think it's kind of both, because this they announced it as like pure concurrency. So, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it can run different functions. But I'm pretty sure that it would most probably run the same functions on one instance. I don't know what's going under the hood, but yeah, when you have this much scale, when you have millions of operations, I'm pretty sure you don't have millions, so you have like thousands of those.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised it wasn't the case before, to be honest. I always thought that they were doing like a bunch of stuff packed into a few large boxes, etc. But glad to see the change. Hopefully, it can be changed in terms of like pricing or speed or whatever. Like when we do our backends, we eventually like start writing these custom functions, and it's great to see like all those extensions for different like services for sending SMS, email, etc., etc. But inevitably, you start adding some stuff on your own anyway. Like, in your experience, do you have a problem with like just managing so many different functions, like coming up with names, seeing like which one of them costs you more, which one of them costs you less, when they getting invoked and things like that? Is it a problem in practice? Is it not? How you live with so many?
Yeah, so I understand. Well, fortunately or maybe unfortunately, I wasn't able to use Firebase at a very large scale. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
I work last 5 years in fintech and banking where data has to be owned privately. So there is no,
Yeah.
how to say, flexibility on handling on cloud. But I use Firebase in smaller functions, oh, sorry, smaller projects. And there, yeah, basically for some hobby project, I had like a monolith, like everything in one JS because it was mostly like a API integrations, for example, third-party APIs, and then you want to access it by your own. But
Mm-hmm.
there are great techniques on how to group them. It really there are a few techniques, one or two actually. So it depends on the nature of your project. You choose one of those. But for a startup or for hobby projects, it can be just one index.js file with yeah, like functions written in one file.
Yeah. If they fit in one file, then
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
not that long,
yeah,
right? So it's hard to it's not hard to think about them that way. That's
yeah.
glad to hear. And I think like I think the problem is less prominent now than it used to be, because it used to be you had to do everything by yourself, and now like with all these extensions, some of the common stuff like sending an email with a new password when a person requests a new password, it's probably going to be done either without a function or with a function which is like one line or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question, like about the data store, right? When the data store, when the data is changed, right, and the data is eventually propagated, sometimes we run functions after the data changes, right? And what if those functions trigger some new changes to data store, and these trigger some other changes, etc., etc.? Can you get this cascading like change of things going on, or and is there any ways to prevent it from happening?
Well, like the different side of the flexibility is when you give too much control or flexibility, you can build awful things. But
Mhm.
of course, I think technically you could do that. Like you have
Mhm.
like a chain of changes that like goes into infinite loop. But for that, there is a limit that you can put. For example, if you have you have like a daily usage, and then when you hit, for example, you can put $10 an hour, and when you are like
Mhm.
approaching that threshold, like 80%, you get notifications, and you could put
Ah,
a thing to, for example, block it, or when it reaches 70%, you get notifications, so you have some time to react. Yeah, basically, I think that's one of the mechanism. Uh, on the other hand, if you have such a chain of events, probably your code is not quite concise and clean. So, which means, yeah. And
mhm.
another thing that was announced last week was that now, when you have like these triggers from Firestore, now they have added like advanced query, so you can have
Mhm.
advanced query, and then when something in that query changes, it triggers the cloud functions. Now it's possible,
Yeah,
before it wasn't.
yeah. You used to have to attach a trigger to every database row, let's say every document
Yeah.
separately, right? Yeah, advanced queries sounds like a very good feature. I'm in generally like I'm surprised with how on one hand side how successful the platform is, while on the other hand how so few people keep using it, right? So it's a very interesting like dynamic that is happening with Firebase all the time. Like I remember when it was new, everybody was like, "Hey, let's move to that. Let's try it out, etc., etc." Then it was kind of on the downward trade, and now it still exists, and it seems like it's the one of the best ways to do applications. Yet I see very low levels of adoption in general in the industry. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think when it was just launched, it was, I think, real-time database mostly that was used,
Yeah.
and it wasn't enough, and you basically get the cumulative effect when you have this kind of ecosystem or like
Mm-hmm.
the entire infrastructure. So you have like authentication that is seamlessly integrated with other services, and the cloud functions that are integrated seamlessly. So yeah, it's basically when everything comes together, it becomes very useful. But in the beginning, they had few
Mm-hmm.
services that were not working well. So I saw a lot of people just using a real-time database, which was good for like a for something, but not like a generic for everything. And what I think gives extra push in popularity now is the machine learning, and also this
Mm-hmm.
the analog of OpenAPI. Actually, this
Mm-hmm.
generative API, the model behind ChatGPT was originally, I think, published by Google, but they didn't develop it further, and OpenAI kind of
Yeah.
went ahead. But now they're like, you probably have seen the meme of the CEO of Google presenting, and there was like an AI thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
now it's kind of on trend, and they have Angular ML and the Palm API, which are like maybe on top two best solutions. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that would gain popularity. So basically, it's like the iPhone when you had like a touch screens in the early phones, which wasn't what you had
Yeah.
stylus, you had camera, but
Yeah.
then all this technology came together, and then there was like a iPhone. You just use it. So I feel like Firebase now it's kind of iPhone where everything together and it works well.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to come up with ideas in general. Like there is so much things that used to not be possible and now are easily available. Like I remember how I had to integrate with obscure library for barcode scanning, and it didn't work like half of the time, and you had to like scan over and over and over again. And now it just up there 2 lines of JavaScript and it happens, and it works much better than I remember back in the day. So it's seems like very easy way to just connect to that world and make it available to your app on mobile and on web, etc. So we'll see how it goes. Uh, People ask you very uncomfortable questions like, what was the biggest application you've ever wrote with Firebase, right? And
Uh, well, the biggest application. Yeah, so it was basically it was a platform for yeah, the project was popular for some time, but now I think it's not active anymore. Is career it was a platform called Career Concierge, where people could, for example, in the US, mostly, for example, you have a daily job, and you don't have
Mhm.
time to apply for jobs, so where you can kind of upload your CV, like resume, and put the parameters of the job that you want. And then there are some people in outsource remotely that paid like per operation, something like that, and then they would apply on your behalf. They would write cover letters. They would write,
Mhm.
yeah, they fill in application manually for yourself, and they so the more you pay, the more they apply for jobs based on parameters. But I think this platform is dying because I think the ChatGPT can do a better job than.
Than humans these days. Yeah, I understand, but it's a cool idea. Like the more Firebase is very pay as you go, right? And this is like apply as you go, right? The more you pay, the more jobs you will be applied to. That's very cool. That's a very cool idea. By I like it. So. Few other questions that I had in mind is like, do you feel like uh, I know that a lot of people are hesitant to move to start the backend on this serverless platform in general, where they don't really, let's say, see the backend, right? Do you feel like the hybrid approach where you like have some of the work let's say outsourced to serverless, but some of the work you keep in your own backend would be useful?
Yeah, that's basically what we're trying to achieve now for the bank, because
Mm-hmm.
like majority of the banks are running on the software from 80s and 90s, so that's like
Yep.
still the backbone. To speed it up, there are like a middleware where it used to cache, but it still work with those applications. And there are, on the other hand, there are small, how to say, not data sensitive things like data, like feedback, communication, where there is no sensitive information. So we're trying to do hybrid and put those in the cloud. So
Yep.
that is one example. Another example, yeah, it's just yeah, it just makes like financial sense switching if like having this server architecture and everything running it. Of course, for some large projects, it makes sense, but not in most of the cases.
Yeah, some stuff like a bank for, let's say, European country. Probably like people mostly do not do banking at night, right? So it makes a lot of sense in terms of like scalability, like spinning up more compute in the morning, then winding it down in the evening. It's a good use of cloud in general and serverless in particular. With that said, I think we should wrap it up, and we're going to go to Discord. So this one, we are disappearing from the translation from the online. But if you want to keep asking, keep talking to Arman and asking more questions, join us in the Discord in the voice chat. See you there.
Thank you. Bye.